Hey everyone, Simon here. Welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. So tonight's episode, I'm going to be covering two stories. The first story is a well-known incident in Hong Kong, so a few of you might have heard a version of this before. But for those of you who haven't, I think you'll enjoy this one. The second story is a story sent in by a viewer. After each story, I'm going to break it down from a Chinese cultural perspective to share what I personally think happened. So let's turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into this one. Do you know how hardcore some older Chinese aunties are about mahjong? I'm talking about a devotion so deep that a literal typhoon won't stop them from finishing a game. This story takes place back in the late 90s. It centers around a woman we'll call Auntie Chan. She was a housewife who never really had to work in her life. Her husband took care of all the bills, which meant she had plenty of free time. In Hong Kong, she's what we call a silai. This is a term for middle-aged housewives who run the household. Over the years, the term has become a bit of a stereotype for women who love a good bargain, enjoy a little bit of gossip, and dress for comfort over fashion. Auntie Chan had a tight-knit group of fellow silais, and they shared one massive obsession: mahjong. They were relentless. The four of them would meet up every single day at one of their apartments and play from morning until night, non-stop. On this particular day, the group of four was over one of Auntie Chan's friends' place, Miss Wong, who lives in Saigon. Miss Wong lived in a modest apartment with her husband and her 20-something-year-old son, Jackie. Her husband was out of the country for business. These women had been friends for decades. They watched each other's kids grow up, so they were all extremely close. By late afternoon, the mahjong tiles were clacking as usual, as they were all chit-chatting and laughing. There was supposed to be a typhoon warning for tonight, but that's never stopped these silais from mahjong. Around dinner time, Jackie came out of his room. He was a good kid who had just landed his first job, working the night shift at a coastal water treatment facility. Because of his schedule, he slept during the day and worked throughout the night. He politely greeted all of his aunties before putting on his windbreaker jacket, picked up his work satchel, and headed off for work. All of the aunties loved Jackie like their own son. All of them had kids of their own, and they were all around the same age as Jackie. So they were all extremely close. Everyone was pretty much family at this point. Fast forward to about 10:30 at night. The aunties were busy playing and chatting away when the sky suddenly ripped open. It didn't just rain, it poured. It was a level black rainstorm warning, the highest weather threat level in Hong Kong. It's pretty much a monsoon. Within minutes, the streets were completely flooded, and the winds were howling against the window, making it shake violently. Miss Wong looked out the window and sighed. "Ayah, the forecast was right. Look at how bad it is out there. The minibuses aren't even running anymore. All of you should stay here for the night and head home tomorrow in the morning when this passes. One of you can sleep in Jackie's room. He's working and he won't be back until morning anyways." They all agreed it would be much safer this way. But they were also excited because that meant they get to play more mahjong. By around midnight, Auntie Chan was already dead tired from staring at mahjong tiles all day. She volunteered to take Jackie's tiny single bed, while the other two aunties shared the pull-out couch. She took a quick shower, pulled the thin blanket over herself, and passed out almost immediately. But in the middle of the night, something strange woke her up. Around 3 a.m., the sound of the front iron gate rattling open echoed through the quiet apartment. In many Hong Kong apartments, you have to unlock this heavy protective gate before you can even reach the front door. Then, she heard heavy footsteps. Squelch, squelch, squelch. It sounded like heavy waterlogged boots walking across the floor, coming straight down the hallway toward her room. Groggy and confused, she listened as the bedroom door slowly creaked open. Suddenly, the cramped little room became freezing cold. And then came the smell. You know that horrible smell of a damp towel that didn't dry correctly? Or the smell of stagnant dirty water? It kind of smelled like that, but 10 times worse. Before Auntie Chan could even figure out where the smell was coming from, the mattress violently sank in behind her. It felt like someone had climbed into the bed. She felt a heavy body press up against her back. It was freezing, and whoever it was, they were soaking wet, dripping freezing water all over the sheets. Assuming Jackie had been sent home early because of the storm, Auntie Chan was just incredibly annoyed. She didn't even bother turning around. Like I mentioned before, Jackie's like a son to her, so she just yelled at him in the dark, like any mother would in this situation. "Hey, Jackie! Have you lost your mind? You're soaking wet. Go take a hot shower. And why are you sleeping in this bed when you can clearly see that I'm in it?" The figure behind her didn't say a word. Instead, all she heard was this wet, rattling gasp, like someone trying to breathe with lungs full of water. Then, the freezing body just rolled over, turning its back to her. Auntie Chan groaned, wiping the freezing dirty water off the back of her neck. "Hey, crazy boy," she muttered. Too exhausted to argue, she simply got up, leaving Jackie to his bed, and she walked out to the living room without looking back at him to go squeeze onto the pull-out couch with the 2 other aunties. The next morning, around 6 a.m., the doorbell started ringing like crazy. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Auntie Chan groggily rubbed her eyes from the couch as she watched Miss Wong walk out of her room to unlock the front gate. Auntie Chan heard Miss Wong muttering under her breath, "Sanzhou lao lao ping guai go ah." Who in the world could it be this early? When she finally pulled the door open, 2 police officers were standing in the dim hallway. They looked incredibly grim. "Good morning, ma'am. We're so sorry to disturb you this morning. I know it's early, but does Jackie Wong live here?" one of them asked. "Yes, I'm his mother. What's going on?" Miss Wong said, her face instantly going pale. The officer who was speaking slowly took off his hat. "Ma'am, we are so sorry to have to come tell you this. Last night, during the worst of the storm, Jackie was outside the plant he worked at, trying to fix one of the meters that went out. He slipped in the high winds and fell into the water. We pulled his body out a couple of hours ago. Your son drowned." Miss Wong dropped to her knees, screaming in denial. No, that's impossible. Jackie went to work last night. He was fine. You're lying. You got the wrong person." Auntie Chan stood there in the hallway watching, totally frozen, with her hand over her mouth in disbelief. The blood completely drained from her face. She looked at her best friend, the crying mother, looked at the cops, and then stammered. Wait, but he did come home last night." The cops looked at her confused. Miss Wong stopped crying and looked up at her. Slowly, Auntie Chan's eyes looked down to the floor. Leading from the front door, straight down the hallway and into Jackie's bedroom, was a trail of dark, muddy puddles that looked like footprints made from work boots. She slowly walked back into Jackie's bedroom and gently pushed the door open. The bed was completely empty, but the sheets and blankets were soaked with muddy seawater, leaving behind a dark, wet outline of a man who had come home to his bed one last time. So, Hong Kong horror family, what do you think about this one? Please, pause the video here and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Alright, so what do I think happened here from a Chinese cultural perspective? So the first thing that I noticed from this story is Jackie's spirit, which appeared to have returned home after death. In my culture, This is something we call Wei Wen, which literally means returning soul. There is a long-standing belief throughout southern China that when a person dies suddenly, the soul does not immediately move on to the next stage of existence right away. Instead, it will instinctively return to the place it considers home, especially if there are strong emotional attachments or loved ones it cannot bear to leave behind. But what I believe is happening here is that Jackie didn't actually realize he has died, because based on traditional beliefs, Wei Wen Ye refers to the soul's formal return on the 7th day after death, not the night of death itself. This is known as the 7th day return, or Tao Cat in Cantonese, which translates to first seventh, which occurs 7 days after death. If we're being culturally accurate, Jackie's appearance on the night he died is not technically considered Tao Cat Wei Wen. Instead, I think this is Jackie's spirit acting on instinct immediately after his death. Because he passed so unexpectedly and quickly, he returns home within hours of death because he doesn't yet realize that he's died. We call this phenomenon 不知自己已死, which translates to not knowing that one has already died. In these situations, the spirit will always continue performing ordinary actions like going home from work or commuting on the train, something that they're used to doing on a daily basis in life. Another possibility comes from the concept of 雷魂, which means a soul that has temporarily separated from the body. It's believed that immediately after death, the soul enters a state where it wanders familiar places before being collected by underworld officials. Because this was not a natural or expected death, there's sometimes a delay before these underworld officials arrive to collect the soul to guide them to the next phase of existence. Do you remember Oxhead and Horseface, known as Ao Tao Ma Min, from some of my older episodes? These two are some examples of the more well-known underworld officials who come to collect souls. Let's take a closer look at Jackie's actions that night. He doesn't talk or interact much. He goes directly to his room and lays down. These are not actions of a spirit deliberately returning to visit family, but more so actions of someone following a routine that's so deeply ingrained in them that it continues even after death. So, I know these concepts may be foreign to a lot of new viewers, but let me break it down for you where it's easier to understand. The spirit of Jackie most likely didn't realize his own death because it happened too quickly and unexpectedly. His spirit was still going through the motions, continuing to act out what he used to do in life. This situation does not relate to Tao Cat Wei Wen, the 7th night return, which is a planned and briefly permitted window of return that happens 7 days after death. During this time, the spirit is usually allowed to visit family intentionally before they move on to the next phase of the process. What happened in Jackie's situation is closer to Mong Wan Fan Ok, the deceased soul returning home, which can happen immediately after death. This is usually only associated with sudden or accidental deaths, where the spirit may not yet understand it's died and continues to follow instinct and habit. So do you want me to expand more on what the concept of 7-day return is? Tao Cat Wei Wen is a very important belief in my culture related to traditional Chinese death customs. It's also one of the most misunderstood because a lot of horror movies often portray this as a terrifying haunting, but in reality, it's not like that at all. It's usually viewed as a final family reunion, not a horror event. The term Tao Cat Wei Wen breaks down into Tao Cat, which means first 7, and Wei Wen, which means returning soul. Remember, when I explained how death as a transitional phase from my past episodes, it's a process and it's not a one-time event. The first 7 days after death is believed to be the first phase out of 7 phases. I won't get too deep into the other phases, as I've already covered that in past episodes before, but I just wanted to highlight the importance of the first 7 days. During this time, the soul has not yet fully completed its journey into the underworld. The spirit still has strong ties to the human world, especially to family members and the home where they had lived in life. The soul may be allowed to return home on the 7th night after death for one final visit before continuing its journey through the underworld, where they will start the process of transitioning to the next phase of existence, which in full usually takes around 49 days. So each phase is 7 days. When a person dies, they don't just simply die and immediately reincarnate. They must first pass through various stages involving underworld officials, judgment, and spiritual processing before reaching their next destination. The 7th night is just one major milestone in that journey. Many traditional Chinese families prepare for this return by leaving food out. Usually, it's favorite dishes of the deceased person. This is not supposed to be a scary thing, but something more emotional. The families are also told not to cry excessively during this time, because if the spirit sees you mourning and so heartbroken over their death, it can make things difficult for them to leave in peace to continue on to the next stage of their journey. Alright, let's continue on to our next story. So this second story was sent in by a viewer. He was fine with me using his real name, which is Saul. Saul lived in Taiwan with his wife and daughter for a few years before moving back to Canada. But during his time there, he experienced something that he couldn't fully explain. He wanted us to help him break down exactly what happened here. So let's dive into Saul's experience. This incident happened years ago. Saul doesn't live in Taiwan anymore, though he still visits his wife's family over there from time to time. But when he did live there, Saul had a deep love for the mountains. He spent countless hours hiking the trails or riding a scooter through the winding, elevated roads. It didn't matter if it was day or night. Whenever he had free time, he headed up there. He loved it. It was so peaceful. Whenever he needed some time away from the city, he went up there alone to be with nature. Now, Saul's wife is Taiwanese, but Saul is not. He's not Asian, so he didn't grow up with the same superstitious beliefs that many of us Asians grew up with. His wife warned him, though, frequently, to be careful when he hikes up in the mountains alone, because mountains are considered places where spirits live. She warned him about the obscure cemeteries scattered throughout the hillsides, and told him to be incredibly careful not to accidentally wander into them. In places like that, she said, spirits can attach themselves to you easily. Saul kept her warning in the back of his mind, but honestly, he didn't really put too much more thought into this. He thought she was just being superstitious. To be respectful, he always promised to be careful, but out there on the trails, he did the exact opposite. He often walked right through those cemeteries, even during his night hikes sometimes. He actually enjoyed wandering through the headstones, reading the dates of birth and death, and imagining the lifetimes of the people buried there. He did this consistently, until one day, something strange started happening. The funny thing is, it didn't happen on a night hike, and it wasn't in some isolated graveyard deep in the mountain. It happened at a small, fairly well-maintained cemetery right beside the mountain road. Saul had passed this spot a ton of times before on his way up the mountain, but he never actually stopped to check it out. On this particular afternoon, before heading up the mountain, he felt strangely drawn to it. He decided to go in and take a walk, and finally check the cemetery out. He took his time wandering from row to row for about 20 minutes or so. He was just about to head toward the exit when he realized he had missed a small area in the far corner in the back of the cemetery. Again, he felt that strange magnetic pull, so he walked over. That's when he saw her for the first time. It was one of the newer graves, featuring a photograph of an incredibly beautiful woman. Saul read the dates on the stone. She died young, only 31 years old. Staring at the photo, Saul spoke out loud. "Wow, such a beautiful girl. what a shame that she passed away so young. And with that, Saul turned around, left the cemetery, and went on with his hike. He thought absolutely nothing of it. But that night, strange events started happening. Saul began having extremely vivid, unsettling dreams. He dreamt of the woman from the photograph. In the dream, Saul was right back at that cemetery. He was wandering the graves, just like he was doing hours earlier. But when he turned to the far corner at the back of the cemetery, she was standing there, in the deep shade of a large banyan tree. She was far away, but Saul recognized her face instantly. She was just as beautiful as her photo, but she looked angry. The moment they made eye contact, Saul jolted awake. What the heck? That was a strange dream, he thought. He tried to brush it off, eventually falling back asleep, dismissing it as just his subconscious playing tricks on him. But the dreams didn't stop. Every single night, he was pulled back into that same cemetery. The scene never changed, except for one detail. In every dream, this woman was standing a little bit closer to him. After a week of this, Saul was starting to become exhausted. He would jolt awake, terrified, and spend the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, not able to fall back asleep again. Heavy bags formed under his eyes. His wife noticed, but she hadn't said anything yet. Then came the worst night. Saul was pulled back into the dreams, but this time, when the woman appeared again, she wasn't standing under the banyan trees anymore. She was only inches from his face. She was still beautiful, but the anger in her expression was terrifying. She stared directly into his eyes, and without her saying a single word, Saul felt a crushing wave of anger and accusation radiating from her. It was as if she was forcing all of her emotions directly into his mind. This time, Saul didn't just jolt awake. He woke up screaming in absolute terror. His sudden shouting scared the living daylights out of his wife. She sat up, panicked, asking, "What is it? Honey, what's going on?" And that's when Saul finally broke down and told her everything. Where he had been going, what he had said to the grave, and the woman who kept appearing in his nightmares. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you this sooner," he said. "I knew you'd be mad. I know, you warned me about this." His wife just sighed. "I did warn you. Just try to go back to sleep for now. I'll take you somewhere tomorrow morning." The next morning, she brought him to a local Buddhist temple. Saul didn't fully understand the rituals, but a monk prayed over him for a long time. The monk told Saul he could feel a heavy, angry presence surrounding him, and that the prayers would break the attachment. Before they left, the monk gave Saul some kind of packet to keep in his wallet, and told him to carry it with him at all times. To this day, Saul still carries it everywhere he goes. After that temple visit, the dreams never returned. And from that day forward, Saul never randomly wandered into a cemetery just for fun again. He finally learned that when the locals give you a warning, you listen, even if you don't fully understand it. Thank you, Saul, for reaching out and sharing your experience with us. So, Hong Kong Horror family, what do you all think happened here? Please, pause the video here and let Saul know your thoughts in the comments below. Alright, so there's actually a lot of stories like this across Asia, where people have experienced things very similar to what Saul went through. For my Hong Kong Horror members, you might remember a similar case of this that a Hong Kong viewer sent in a few months ago from the funeral parlor. Alright, let's break this down, and I'll share what I personally think happened here. There's a lot of details from Saul's experience that stand out right away. First, I do not believe Saul imagined any of what he experienced. In my culture, dreams are considered one of the most common methods for spirits to communicate and interact with the living. Because when a person is asleep and dreaming, This is the moment when our spiritual defenses are at its lowest, because our yang hei, which is yang energy in English, naturally goes down when we're asleep. It's also believed that sleep is a temporary loosening of the connection between the body and the one, the spiritual aspect of a person. This is why dreams are often the preferred method of communication for spirits, because it requires far less energy for them to appear in your dreams than it does to physically manifest in the waking world. Not all spirits are even strong enough to appear in the waking world for you to see. When they enter your dreams, it's kind of like them meeting you halfway. They don't have to fully enter the physical realm, which is far easier on their end. So there are different levels of interactions between the spirit world and our world. The weakest form would be something like a vague feeling like you're being watched, sudden chills, unexplained sadness, or just getting a sense that somebody is nearby. The level up from this would be dream contact. We call this bomong or tokmong. They're usually repeated symbolic dreams. There are many stories where spirits deliver messages this way to loved ones. The next level above this one would be waking manifestations. So this would be hearing voices, seeing shadows, and objects moving. The next step up from this is where you would have the more powerful stuff. It's the further end of the spectrum. These would be your possessions, physical attacks, and powerful hauntings. So for Saul, the first thing that stood out to me is that he enjoyed checking out random cemeteries and reading the tombstones, which is really interesting to me. So me, being a Chinese American, I can see how this isn't a big deal from a Western standpoint, because growing up here in the States, my best friend was Caucasian, and I remember, as a kid, when I went hiking with him and his dad, they did the exact same thing. If there was a cemetery nearby, they would go in and just check out the tombstones. It's definitely a cultural difference. Also, I don't know if you remember back in elementary school, kids would use a blank sheet of paper and a crayon, put the sheet of paper onto tombstones at the graveyard, then lay the crayon sideways and run it against the paper. It was kind of like carbon copying. It will copy down the name of the tombstone onto the piece of paper because of all the grooves. Do any of you that grew up in the States remember this as a kid? So both of these things are a big no-no in Chinese culture. Traditional Chinese people will never do these things. We have a saying that goes, "Ning ho sun ke yao, but ho sun ke mo," which means it's better to believe something might exist than to assume it absolutely does not. We won't randomly go into a cemetery for fun, because to us, cemeteries are considered places for the dead, not recreation. There's a traditional saying, "Yam yang yao bi," which I think applies here. This translates to the yin and the yang realms should remain separate. It pretty much means that the living belong to the yang realm, and the dead belong to the yin realm. A cemetery is viewed as a place where these two worlds come close together. So when Chinese people do go, it's for a reason. Usually, it's when we go to visit ancestors, attend funerals, clean graves of loved ones, or making offerings to loved ones. Wandering around there for fun can be viewed as inappropriate because you're entering a space intended for the dead and their families. Also, cemeteries are believed to contain extremely heavy yin energy because the area is saturated with death-related energy. So, was this woman's spirit angry at Saul? Well, it's hard to say because we don't know for sure how this woman died. She could have already been a vengeful spirit before Saul walked in there. She could have just followed him, not because she was offended, but because there was a connection formed. Ghosts and humans, generally for the most part, leave each other alone unless some sort of connection forms. This is why a lot of older Chinese people always give you warnings such as, don't call out to spirits, don't challenge them, don't respond if someone calls your name when you're out alone at night, don't point at graves, and don't read the inscriptions on the graves out loud. The main fear behind all of this is not the fear of offending them, but it's the fear of establishing some sort of connection. The old saying, if you don't bother them, they won't bother you is fitting here. In my opinion, I don't think this female spirit was specifically angry at Saul. He entered her space and established a connection, making her able to attach herself to him. Saul wasn't really being disrespectful or anything like that. He was just walking around the resting grounds, reading the names, looking at the photos, thinking about the lives of all the people who died there. He was giving attention towards them, and attention goes both ways. Now, I want to turn our attention to another detail that Saul pointed out. When he was in the cemetery, he was getting ready to leave before he had this urge to check out the back of the cemetery where this woman's grave was. In my culture, this could be interpreted as yunfan, a karmic connection or destined encounter, but there's a darker variation of this called guaiyun, literally a connection with spirits. There have been many accounts of people feeling an inexplicable urge to visit a particular location or turn down a certain path. People often describe it exactly the way Saul did, a strange pull that didn't make any logical sense. I honestly think this woman noticed Saul long before he noticed her. She was probably already watching him from the moment he stepped foot in that cemetery. Saul also mentioned that he's been to many cemeteries already before this one, meaning he's been exposing himself to heavy yin energy for a while. This could make him more susceptible to spiritual influences. I don't mean like possession, but rather that his own energetic state becomes more compatible with the spirit world. She probably influenced him with that urge to turn back there. Another thing that stood out to me is what Saul did at the grave. He looked directly at the woman's photo and talked out loud, saying how beautiful she was and what a shame it was that she passed so young. This doesn't sound too bad, right? It's a compliment. So, to my American side, looking at this from a Western perspective, I agree with you. This sounds completely harmless, but the Chinese side of me thinks otherwise. Though this is not disrespectful, speaking directly to a grave is discouraged in my culture, especially the grave of a random person you don't know. This is related to a concept called jiu ye. Jiu means to attract, and ye means to provoke or invite. Many times, you won't know how long these spirits have been lingering there for. Over time, their families move away. Time passes by, and eventually, no one remembers their names anymore. So imagine they've been stuck there for a long time. Then one day, someone like Saul randomly stops by, acknowledging them, expressing sympathy for her death. In simple terms, it's acknowledgement. From her perspective, it's a connection, an invitation to interact. I don't really think this woman was out to get Saul. Traditionally, people who die young, violently, or die with intense regrets usually leave behind a very strong yun hei, which means resentment energy. This woman died extremely young. She would most likely fall into the category of spirits called yun wan, which is a wronged or aggrieved soul. They're not necessarily evil or dangerous, just burdened by unresolved emotions. She was most likely still carrying a tremendous amount of resentment and sorrow. I don't think the anger he felt through her was directed at him personally, but he was simply experiencing the emotional state that defined the spirit itself. This is why she never harmed him or spoke to him. I don't believe she had ill intentions toward Saul. She probably just wanted to be acknowledged or was lonely. She was probably stuck there at the cemetery for so long, and then, suddenly, someone stops by to establish a connection with her. These types of connections are relatively easy to break, since it was caught so early on. I wouldn't consider Saul's experience particularly powerful haunting. We have two distinctions for these situations. The first is called Tim Seung, which means something has rubbed off on you, and the other is called Dao Qin, which pretty much means something is deeply entangled with you. Saul's situation would fall under the first category. These connections usually can be broken through temple prayers, offerings, protective talismans, or Buddhist chants. It seems that Saul's dreams were becoming stronger over time though, where this woman was getting closer to him. So it's a good thing that his wife brought him in early to get this resolved. Breaking a connection after 1 week is much easier than breaking one after a few months or years. The longer a spirit is believed to remain attached, the more difficult separation becomes. And the longer they hang around, the higher the chances that connection can turn into something much more dangerous. Oh, and the packet that the monk gave Saul is almost certainly a protective talisman. It's not to protect him from the same female spirit, but it's more so for future protection, in case Saul ever comes across another spirit. It's used to reinforce the separation between him and any future spirits he comes across. These are extremely common, and I actually carry one around as well. It's been in my wallet for years now. Thank you, Hong Kong Horror family, for making it all the way to the end of this week's episode. Until we speak again next week.